So welcome to What's Your Story? I'm Alex James, and today's guest is Janine Milburn. Now, Janine has a story to tell which is sensitive, it's emotional, and it's about her daughter, Georgia, and her name is Georgia Jones, you were just telling me. So, Janine, tell me, start from the beginning, just before this happened to Georgia.
Okay, well, Georgia was 18. She worked for people with learning disabilities. So she wasn't at work, she was sort of out with friends. She was at that sort of age. She had a very big personality, extremely loud, typical 18-year-old, sort of used to chat all day long. You definitely knew when she was in the house, put it that way. Well, they were planning on going to a festival, which is local to us.
It's a music festival.
A music festival, yes. Mutiny. It previously run for a few years. They'd gone the year before. One of her sisters was going, so yeah, fine, okay. I mean, she was 18 anyway. So yeah, excuse me. The morning of the festival, they got ready here, and as you can imagine, with girls getting ready for a day out, it was clothes, music, you name it, it was going on. They were getting a lift at about midday, and her and her sister both left home, sort of shouted, "Mum, we're going now." Okay, so I went outside to see them off. They looked absolutely lovely in all their clothes, makeup all done to the nines. Yeah, said, "Love you, be good, be careful," which is what I always used to say to them, "and I'll see you later tonight, I presume, somewhere." And off they went.
So it was an afternoon thing.
Yes. So it was an all weekend, actually, but because they lived, it was only down the road, they were coming home that night. And yeah, they went off. It only takes about 5 minutes, 10 minutes up the road. It's not that far. Me and my husband were out doing the garden, and we get a phone call at about 4:30 from my other daughter that had gone, saying, Mum, Georgia's fitting. I've got the paramedics here. They want to talk to you." So I went, okay. And they sort of explained that she'd been found by a couple of girls, and they were trying to stop her fitting. She'd taken MDMA, which I later found out. MDMA, it's a tablet form of ecstasy. And she'd taken 2 of these. I was like, okay, what sort of goes on now? What's happening? And they said, well, we're working on her now. We're trying to stop the fitting. We're not having much luck. So if you meet us down the hospital, we'll let you know when we get there. Well,
so just going back, so you're in your garden, doing your garden. They've gone off for this lovely festival, which I imagine, you're excited for them because they're young, but, you're a mum like me, so you probably are worried as well that, behave, don't drink too much, whatever. But the furthest thought from your mind, because, I mean, she wasn't a drug addict or a person that had perhaps even taken drugs before, so that wasn't in your head. And you get this horrendous phone call saying that she's fitting and that paramedics are with her. I mean, what goes through your head?
Not a lot.
Was it like, God, what was it like that?
Yeah. She had previously, about 9 months before, told me she had tried weed, cannabis, and she had tried cocaine at a couple of parties. But she sort of steered away from those people, and she's like, "Mum, I'm not doing it anymore. I don't really like it." So it was, although she had told me
a really good relationship with her, because you were open to talking to her about these things, which is good.
Yeah. It was still quite a shock that she had done it again. As I say, after 9-10 months of telling me every month that she hadn't taken anything. But my husband's epileptic, so I know fits can be extremely scary, and I'm not naive when it comes to fitting. I'm a carer, so I work with sort of that horrible end of life side of things as well. So I suppose I'm quite numb when it comes to anything medical like that, although it is still a shock when you're told it's your child that's doing it.
And I suppose you'd have gone into like a numb shock, you know, because it's, and then you have like that moment of chaos, don't you, where you're thinking, what should you take with you? How quick are you going to get there? And
yes, yeah. Well, actually, during the phone call to the paramedics, a mutual friend had turned up at the house, and they actually drove me down to the mutiny grounds, where I met my daughter. And Georgia was just being put into the ambulance. I literally saw her feet go in. And the ambulance team then sort of said to me, do you want to come down to the hospital with us? Yeah, please. Said to my daughter, I'll call you when I know what's going on. Stay here. So, yeah, that's sort of what we did. And luckily the hospital, again, is only 2 minutes drive from where the ground.
At that point, you hadn't really grasped how serious.
Not at all. Not at all. They were telling me in the ambulance how serious it was. Did I realise what was going on? And to be honest, I didn't have a clue. Like you said, you go very numb. You just sort of go through the motions, I suppose.
And was your husband with you at this time?
He stayed at home.
Because you hadn't realised what you were...
Exactly. Yeah. We didn't know. You hear the stories. And I suppose I was thinking, worst case scenario, hospital for a few days, and then she'll be home and I can sort of have a go at her then. That was, I suppose, the worst I was thinking at the time. But yeah, we got to the hospital and they sort of said to me there, do you want to come through to resus with us while we work on her, or do you want to go into the family room? Like I said, I work in the care system, and as much as families want to be there, I felt I'd be in the way, I suppose. They can get on better without thinking about me or what I might think. So I went and waited in a family room. I suppose half an hour after that, the consultant that was dealing with Georgia came to talk to me. And
were you on your own or with your friends still?
I was on my own at that time.
And you still really hadn't grasped how serious this was?
Not at all. He came and asked me if I knew what she'd taken. And I said, as far as I'm aware, what we've been told, she's taken MDMA. He said, do you know what? Because there's lots and lots of different ones out there. Do you know which one? Do you know how much? I said, apparently it's 2 pills. He's like, okay, do you know how MDMA works? I haven't got a clue. He said, right, okay, what happens is MDMA works by raising the body temperature. And with it being a hot day, this is back in May, it was a hot day at a festival. They're intense, so again the temperature goes up, and basically her body is just overloaded with temperature, and because of the high temperature she had started fitting. Now her fitting was quite violent and had gone on for 50 minutes. And whatever they were giving her, it wasn't stopping. It was still carrying on. Because of that, the brain then gets starved of oxygen. And so you end up with a bit of permanent brain damage, even at that point. They then still couldn't cool her down, couldn't bring her temperature back down, couldn't settle the fitting. So basically the body sort of gives up and it can't cope anymore with what's going on. So the muscles start to break down, and they break down and dissolve into the bloodstream. And the trouble is that then causes the blood to turn acidic. And of course your blood goes all around your body. So it then affects every single organ. And this is before she'd even got to the hospital. And by the time she had actually got to the hospital, her heart had already stopped 3 times. And each time it had got harder to restart. And I suppose it was at this sort of point that I realised, okay, this could be a lot worse than what I was imagining in my head. He asked me if I could find out exactly what pills she'd taken, because then they might be able to try different medication. And he went off. So I was then on the phone to my daughter to see if she knew anything else. She didn't have a clue.
And all of that, sorry to interrupt you, but all of that information that you've just given me, I'm assuming you've learnt that since. So while you're in this waiting room, and I'm now in the waiting room with you, I'm still thinking, must find out what she's taken, because you would still be thinking they can reverse this.
Yes.
They've obviously, there's something they're going to do. You haven't the knowledge of what's happening to Georgia now.
No. Although, like you said, I now obviously realised how serious it was. Death still didn't sort of cross my mind at all. It was just, okay, we'll deal with whatever as it comes, and we'll get on with it. So yeah, but talking to my other daughter, she's like, no, sorry, Mum, we don't know, because they said although they'd gone together or left the house together, they hadn't gone together. They were going in just different group of friends. You don't socialise with your siblings when you're out. That's embarrassing, especially if you're girls. No. So yeah, they hadn't seen each other the whole time they've been there, so she didn't actually know. Luckily, the girls that had found Georgia were girls that knew both of them as well, so that's how they'd managed to get hold of her. So yeah, we were still in the dark. So I called round people to let them know what was going on, my husband to let him know, my other daughter as well, just to have everybody on standby. This is what's going on, this is what's happened, I'll let you know as soon as I know anything. He came back again about half an hour later, the consultant. Had I found out what she'd taken? And like I said, unfortunately, no, I didn't have a clue. And he'd actually been on the phone to specialists from around the country as well to try and find different things to try. Nothing was working still. Her heart had stopped again. It was getting harder and harder to start each time, because obviously it weakens. And the longer she was in this state, obviously the more brain damage you were likely to have at the end of it. And he actually told me at that point, it's really not looking good. I'd best start calling family to get them down. So I'm like, oh my god, okay, this is serious now. So he went off and left me to make the phone calls. So I called my husband, every single family member. Luckily, most of us are quite local. Probably another 40 minutes later, everyone had sort of just coming through the doors, and the consultant came back again, and he said to me, look, he said, her heart has stopped again. So it's the 5th time. We have just about restarted it, but now her lungs are filling with blood, vomit and stomach acid, and basically there's nothing we can do now. The only thing we can do is to turn the machines off. And I actually said to him, before we do that, can I go and kill her first? Being a mum, there's just the words that sort of come out.
That's because you actually, I mean, I think you hear what they're saying, don't you? You're there, you're present, but there's part of you that's like, this is some unbelievable thing, some tsunami of things that's happening. It's not real, or it's not, this is not going to work out how the other half of me knows it is. So you say things like that, but actually it's just so shocking, isn't it? I mean,
it is. Very surreal. It is like you're I suppose watching a telly program or a film,
and then you've got all those people turning up who are going to be slightly hysterical, like what's happening, or you know, that you're trying to then convey the story to, but you're still in that place of shock.
Exactly. So we then walked through the hospital. A lot of the nurses, as you're walking up the corridor, sort of hung their heads. They all knew what was going on. It was a big thing that night. And we went in and we said our goodbyes. And the last thing she did, which is Georgia to a T, was to turn her head slightly and be sick on her sister. What more can I say? That was the sort of personality she was. We turned her machines off,
but she wasn't properly conscious when that happened.
Not at all. But no, she died at 8:20 that evening. So yeah, I'd last seen her at midday, and she was gone under 9 hours later. It all happened very quick. We were allowed to stay in the hospital for as long as we wanted with her. And and they said they'll clean her up and get her sorted. Again, girls being girls at 18, I asked that her eyebrows be left on because it took her hours that morning, and she was very happy with her eyebrows. And they put her into a side room, and we stayed there probably till about 11:30, because you don't want to leave them.
No, and it's just, I mean, this is just so big to take in, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, very quick.
And the way that you're saying to me, you know, the eyebrows, I mean, you know, it's like, you can pick up the shock from that, because you're thinking of what she would be thinking, but the reality is she's thinking nothing because she's gone from you. Yeah. I mean, this is horrific, isn't it? It's horrendous for you.
Definitely. And again, it's still a lot of shock going on, and numbness, and I suppose that you say you're not in the moment, it's going on somewhere else. You're just doing what you've got to do and not thinking about anything. Just did what I had to do, and I suppose I wanted to stay strong for everybody else. I don't like crying or anything in front of people. I'm very private in that way.
So you went into mum role because
exactly
there at the hospital.
Yeah.
So the family had come to the hospital. Were they in the room with you?
Yes. Yeah. All her siblings were there. She had 4 step siblings, and her 2 siblings, they all made it. My parents made it down. A friend of mine made it down. There was quite a lot of us there, and everyone made it there to say goodbye. But the sad thing is, we found out while we were in there that someone else had already lost their life as well.
Oh my goodness!
Drugs from the festival, and there had actually been another 11 cases that had been brought in that evening, all related to drugs, different things, but it had been a big thing at the hospital that evening, and it affected many people. I've spoken to the consultant a few times, and I've spoken to the nurses that were there, and it was a big emotional evening for everybody involved, because it was so quick and such a huge thing that went on that day. Via her inquest later on, we found out that she hadn't drunk any alcohol or taken any other drugs, so it was just the MDMA that had been in her system, and it had turned out to be so pure that it was roughly 6 times over what you would expect to find as a so-called safe adult dose.
Wow.
But there was nothing else in her system at all other than what the hospital had put in. It was just that one drug, nothing else. A lot of people think a pure drug is a safe drug, and it's not. You also get the high strength that side. But we'd also found out as well, there's a lot we don't know about what happened that day. Georgia had gone, let's say, with a group of friends. We even now don't know who that group of friends were. She knew many people. She knew one Chloe, she knew 10 Chloes. It was that sort of, and you stop listening after a while. Being a mum to a teenager, you just nod your head. So we still don't know now who she was with. We don't know who she got the drugs from. Like I said, she was found luckily by 2 girls that knew her and her sister, and they had tried to get her to walk, and they said she was gurning a lot, so they got her to try and drink. She wouldn't do any of this, and it was with them that she'd started going in and out of consciousness, which is how they found out she'd taken 2 MDMA pills through asking her. Obviously Georgia still wasn't really with it. She kept telling them to leave her alone. She was having a party, she was fine. So I suppose in that way she died happy. She didn't know all the horrible bit that went
her
on.
Last moments of consciousness, she was at that party.
Yeah. She was having a party.
Does that comfort you, Janine?
It does help. Because she didn't know anything. She didn't know anything about the fitting. She didn't know any of the nasty stuff. She was having a great time, and that is how she went.
And then after that, so this has happened. I'm imagining then there was a lot of press about it because of it being a festival.
Yeah.
What was the press take on this? What was the reaction of the press, and how did you get to tell your story? I know you've done a lot of other work, but I want to sort of get that bit in as well. So, because I know that you've got a lot to say about the death and the stigma around that. So, what was that like when they reported it in the press? And
well, it was that night. I kept getting lots of text messages from Georgia's friends saying, "Was that Georgia? Was it Georgia? We heard it was. Is she all right?" And I thought, I've got to let everyone know what's happened. And like I said, it was a 2-day event, and I thought, oh my God, there's going to be kids going again the next day. And I know if she'd have gone and she'd have survived, she'd have done exactly the same the day after. So I made sure I told certain people first, and then I actually put it on Facebook that evening that yes, it was Georgia that had died. And I, without going into too much detail, said what had happened to her body. I thought, I've got to scare people in the nicest possible way that there is drugs out there. This is what has just happened to her. Like I said, she knew a lot of people, and I just wanted to warn people. And that's why I went very public with it at the very beginning. The police then got involved, obviously, because of what it was. So I had a lot of press at the door. I could choose to talk to who I wanted to, sort of that thing. But again, I thought if I can get this story out as quickly as I can, hopefully we'll help a few people and we'll stop it happening to a few people. Because I went very public, I was on my phone continually reading messages to see what people have said, and there was a lot of people that were absolutely lovely, really was, I can't deny that. But there was a handful of people that their comments were disgusting, basically. You had the I suppose the normal comments, it's her own fault, she knew what she was doing, drugs are for mugs, she was 18, you can't. And it's like, well, actually, she turned 18 in the February. This is May. She wasn't an adult. She was still very much a child. She didn't have a clue of what she was doing. If she had, she wouldn't have done what she did. And there were a lot of other nasty, nasty things.
Did that shock you, how that people would react in that way?
I suppose so, with the really nasty stuff. So I've never repeated that, and I never would, because it was disgusting what was said. And that side of it, yes, did shock me. And a lot of it, to be honest, was linked to religious beliefs, put it that way. And there's no need for it. They didn't know her. They didn't know who she was. This was just because I'd gone public, and it's someone to, I suppose, troll and be nasty to. I'm quite laid back. If I don't know someone, if you don't like me, it doesn't affect me. So yes, I read those comments. Yes, at the time, I was very saddened by them, but I didn't take them to heart. I will never let them bother me, but I won't ever forget them.
No. But you were saying to me there's like a stigma attached to it, almost like if you die because you've got some illness, if your child dies, it's kind of like there's a stigma to saying, well, my child died because of drugs.
Very much so. Even people that I know, they didn't know how to talk to me, they didn't know how to react to it. Because it wasn't, I suppose, if she'd have died of cancer, say, or had an illness for a long, long time, or got run over by a car, all these other deaths that could have happened, I suppose people are a bit more empathetic, I suppose. But because it's drugs, and because she put them in her mouth, I suppose, and everyone knows that you die from drugs, you've been brought up that way, and that's the sort of situation there is with drugs. People think that every person that dies from drugs is a drug addict. No, there's so many accidental overdoses out there, and
I think we'd be surprised if we knew just who took drugs, to be honest, because
very much
I think it's a lot more common than we perhaps think.
Definitely. I mean, and again, it's sort of I suppose with alcohol, many people die of alcohol each year, and I'm talking thousands. But because alcohol's legal, it's okay, it's encouraged, and it's tragic if someone dies of alcohol. But in comparison with MDMA, especially in 2018, there were 75 deaths of MDMA. In that same year, there were over 7,000 alcohol deaths that year. To sort of just put it in comparison, but these people that are dying from MDMA are getting all the stigma, they're getting all the backlash that comes around with drugs, because drugs are illegal, you shouldn't be doing them. Alcohol's okay, so it's okay if you die from alcohol, but if you die from drugs, you're not worthy of anything. It was your own fault, and it's very much that sort of stigma.
Do you think if they legalised drugs, it would make a difference because they could be monitored more? I mean, do you think that's something that is a positive move, or would that be a negative move?
I don't know. I contradict myself a lot when it comes to legalisation of drugs. Yes, if they were legalised, you could. You wouldn't have the high strengths. Everything would be one strength. It would all be okay, and you'd be told how to take it, what to do. But at the same time, it wouldn't get rid of the black market when it comes to drugs. I think it would make that go even further, hidden away from society. And I mean, like when it comes to cocaine, I suppose it's all comes from the cartels at the end of the day, and I can't see how you could ever legalise cocaine. And cocaine, for the 8th year running now, is claiming more and more lives. It is one of the top killers, and anybody and everybody takes cocaine. You'd be surprised. I'm talking lawyers, consultants. It's not just... It's
almost like a social thing now, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, I say that to you, and you know, I have a heroin addict in my family, and I've never ever, thank God, because I think I would have an addictive personality, I think. But the most I've ever done is smoke cigarettes, and gave that up like 30, 40 years ago. But I think I'm fortunate, really fortunate in my life not to have been involved in that, having had that around me. But yeah, I honestly, I agree with you. I think that it is seen by lots of people as just an everyday thing now. And it's very frightening, because then, you know, that's probably, it's not okay. That's not the word I want to use, but that's okay for the people who can afford to buy the good stuff. It's the people who fall prey to dealers who are dealing in stuff that isn't so good. Or the children, and they are, well, young people that are taking it, don't really understand what it is that they're taking. I mean, you know, you're bright and clever, and I'm assuming that Georgia wasn't stupid. So if somebody had told her what she was taking, she may have made a different choice. But I think it sort of is out there as it's part of the gig, isn't it? It's part of the festival. It's part of the fun if you're in that scene. And it's common.
Very much so, very much so. I mean, I actually spoke to the promoter of Mutiny. It took me a few months to do it. He asked if, sort of when I was talk to us, and it was actually him that got my brain in gear, and I suppose the cogs turning. And he said to me, did I know what front of house testing was? I haven't got a clue. Basically, a lot of festivals will have back of house testing, which is when, if drugs are confiscated, they will then be tested to see what they are. Whereas front of house testing is a tent that's at a festival, for example, and before you take your drugs, you can go and get it tested to see what it is.
Really?
What strength it is, and things like that. And you also get a consultation on how to take it, how to be safe, and things like that as well. It's
you don't get a lecture of don't take it.
No, it's agreed by the police that the police don't get involved with this tent. But obviously, if there is
it can keep people safe.
Yeah, if there's anything that's found that's really, really nasty, they are advised to hand it over and not take it. But you have to let people make their own choices. It's when you take that choice away from people that they keep very quiet, and like with drugs altogether, it's the sort of the thing you don't talk about. Whereas if we spoke about it more, I think people would realise what is going on out there rather than sort of trying to shut the shutters on it. So yeah, this front of house testing, I thought that is absolutely brilliant. Why don't they have that at every single festival? Why isn't it part of, if you're having a music thing, then you have to have front of house testing? So I sort of started looking at things like that, and I got a petition going. Didn't do as good as I'd have hoped, to be honest, but once I sort of took a step back and looked at the whole thing, actually you can't make that a thing that you have, because it's only certain music festivals that bring the drugs in. You won't go to a country music festival and expect to find everybody on ecstasy or LSD and things like that. So you can't, it's not as sort of simple, as black and white as I would have hoped it would have been. But since then, I've spoken to Professor Measham, who runs the Loop, who does a lot of front of house testing. She's world renowned. She works in Australia as well. She's sort of the top of her game, put it that way. And she's trying to get this into city centres as well. Because like she said, if you just have it at festivals, what do you do for the rest of the year? So it's very much a thing that I support privately, and will help her in any way I can. And yeah, she puts out a lot of alerts and things like that if she finds bad batches out there, or high strength drugs that have got other things in them that are extremely dangerous. And she shares all that information. And there's a lot of things you can do. You can test at home, for example. You can buy Regency tests and test your own drugs before you take them to make sure they are what they are. It can't give you the strength, but at least you know you're definitely taking MDMA or cocaine and things like that. So that's a sort of a big thing for me. I think if we can't legalise, then we need to be as safe as possible. Exactly. And sort of it, then the brain started going again and the cogs were turning. I'm like, okay, I'm finding all this information out. Let's share it. So I started a Facebook page and I started sharing things. And while I was doing that, I thought, well, actually, we need to go on to education. If we teach young people what they need to learn as they're growing, then actually by the time they get to 16, 17, 18, and they're going to these festivals, hopefully they'll know a little bit more. They'll sort of know how to be safe. Again, at that age, you still do what you want to do. But if you know what to do, then you've got a bit more of a chance. Like I said, Georgia didn't have a clue. She took 2 pills. Whether she took them at the same time or what, I don't know. But actually, she should have only taken a quarter of a pill and seen how she was. So that's how much she didn't know. She didn't even know how much to take in one go. And if she'd have taken a quarter, she might have had that chance to go, actually, this is really strong. This is really messing me up. I'm not going to take any more. And she might have come home that night. That's the difference between knowing how to take something a bit safer and going in totally blind.
Did you meet resistance to that? Because did you meet resistance to educating? I'm just wondering. So you're going into school educating children now, I know, and talking about this. But I'm guessing because your daughter has died, that's something that's helpful in getting you in to talk about it, because you've got a really valid reason to go and talk about it. Whereas if you wanted to go and educate young people in the same way, you might meet resistance and no, they better not know, because if they don't know, then they won't do it, which is not true. So you're going along the road of, well, we can't trust that they won't do it, but if they're going to, let's give them protection. It's the same thing with condoms, isn't it? In a way, I know that's not, but it is. When we first started talking to children about safe sex and things like that, we there was resistance to it, like as if to say, if we don't tell them, then they won't be doing it. But of course, young people haven't changed in all ever time and want to try everything because they can. It's there.
Yeah. And the more you tell a young person, especially not to do something, I mean, I know what I was like as a teenager. I was never naughty, but if you say to someone, there's a big red button there, whatever you do, don't touch it because something might happen. They're going to go and touch it.
Well, because you become more curious, don't you?
Exactly.
Secrecy creates inquisitivity.
That's what a lot of this is for young people taking drugs. It's curiosity, pure and simple. And yeah, so there is a lot of resistance. There's a lot of people that don't understand, I think, what harm reduction is, which is what it is. It's harm reduction education. So I'm not going in there saying, don't do that, you will die. Because those children, young people, could probably reel off 20 people that take drugs every day and are okay. So as an adult going in and saying to them, don't do that, you'll die, they know straight away you're lying to them. Yes, there's a possibility. We all know there's a possibility, but they won't believe a word you say after that.
So when you go to schools, is this a program now that you've started, that you're spreading out across the country, hopefully, or is it just a couple of schools you've gone to, or do you go out to lots of schools? How's it sort of evolving?
Well, I said, it started off with the Facebook page. Georgia Jones Don't Go With the Flow. She was always called Flo at home. That was her nickname. So I thought it was quite apt. It worked. Yeah. And I thought, okay, I can tell her story. But as I was looking deeper and deeper into things, and I said I was learning as I was going, I said, oh my God, it's such a different world out there to what I thought. I thought I knew enough to keep my child safe. Actually, I haven't got a clue. County lines, for example, you hear about it in the papers, and county lines is where young people are used to traffic drugs up and down our own country. This isn't going anywhere else. This is in England, and it happens every single day. Even if it's going 10 miles up the road, a lot of drug dealers now will use young people, because if a young person gets caught, there is a high chance they won't go to prison. If an adult gets caught with a substantial amount of drugs, they're going to go straight to prison. The consequences are more. So that's sort of that side of it, let alone...
How do they find these children, do you think?
Lots and lots of different ways. People used to believe that it was just people from poorer backgrounds who had a lot of difficulties that way, and children, it's very easy to groom if you can find a way in. And it's actually not that. There's also children from private schools who maybe haven't got the perfect home life, I suppose. People think if you've got money, you're okay. And the same
and
as
they may have funds to be able to buy it as well. Yeah,
exactly. So if there's any sort of way these drug dealers can get in, they are finding that little loop and getting in. It's not all about giving them money or a new pair of shoes or taking them away to a hotel for a weekend. It's friendship. It's having a family there. There's lots of different niches where they can find these young people and bring them in. And once you're there, you're not letting go at all. They are keeping hold of you until they decide they are done with you. It's a very nasty world out there when it comes to county lines and going on our doorsteps, no matter where you live, no matter what your background.
So these children are recruited almost to take a drug, say from, it might be, say, near where to Islay, it might be to Aylesbury, but that's their run, and they would do that regularly for these people.
Yeah. Really? And then they're made to do other things to work their way up the ladder, or they're told to recruit more people and then they can earn a bit of money. It's a very good business. If you forget about what it's about, they run these as businesses basically, and like a bit like a pyramid business you see all the time. If you sell this, you can keep a bit of that, and yeah, it just builds and builds. But it's very dangerous for these young people, and it's very scary out there as well. And like I say, it's happening everywhere. It doesn't matter what your background, rich or poor, black or white, it happens. So again, that's sort of another thing to take into schools, as well as the Georgia's story, which there's a lot to learn from. She did everything wrong that day, and so if you can learn from every step she did wrong, then you might be able to keep yourself safe. There's a lot of different drugs out there. It then sort of leaks into peer pressure and risk taking. Why do young people do it? I mean, we all know about peer pressure. I know myself, I might say to a friend of mine, shall we go out? And they're like, no. Yeah, come on then. So even as adults, we do it. And it's just part of nature. That's what you do. And we all take risks. We all know.
I think loneliness. Do you think loneliness? Because I think even though, I mean, now we are kind of isolated more. But I think being human, we need connection, and I think this new sort of internet sort of media age, this technical age that we're in, has isolated people, but the need to be human is still there, and that connection is still there. And so
we need to feel belonged, don't we? We need to belong to something.
Yeah, and I think I think belonging to something on a group gives you something, but I think that when that's lost to you within your family, like you said, you can fall prey to it outside because you want to be part of something. We all have to be part and be connected, and and like you said, they're isolating these young people and making them feel important. And then they have them, they groom them, and then they're doing these runs for them and things.
Yeah. And also along my sort of journey of learning, I didn't know that the brain changes during puberty. I didn't know that. I mean, we all know children, young people take risks, and we all know that they can be not necessarily the naughty children, but they might go and do something that they wouldn't necessarily do, or you wouldn't think they would do. And actually there's a lot going on with the brain, with chemicals, up until the age of like 25, starting at sort of like 12, 13, up until 25, you have all these chemical changes going on. I sort of describe it as your angel and your devil on your shoulders, whispering to things. And the devil wins a lot of the time in this. Although they know something is wrong, or they know they maybe shouldn't do something, that little devil just keeps whispering to them, and they're like, go on then, I'll go and do it. And that, along with peer pressure, like you said, and trying to belong to something, might tip them over to do something that they wouldn't necessarily do. But it's not being nasty, it's not being naughty, it's being a teenager. It's what's going on up there, and it's natural. It is nature's way. If you didn't have these chemical changes going on, we wouldn't have our explorers. We wouldn't have people that climb the highest mountain, or deep sea dive, or go out to space. It's all to do with that. And I think a lot of the time,
knowledge all of this is vast now, isn't it? Because you've really sort of taken up this and I've gone through this horrific, and it is horrific. And I know that the thing that I'm always mindful of is, yes, you're doing all of this, but there's still going to be those moments for you of she's not there and she's not coming back.
Every day.
And and because you're doing this, it could almost be lost in that. But the drive to do that is also, I think, and I think people need to grasp this. It's not only about you doing it because of how she died. It's actually you doing it because you think, God, I would hate anybody else to ever go through what I am going through.
Yeah.
And you can't even say what you've gone through, because this is a forever journey, isn't it? That she's not here. But this doing this thing and hoping that, well, maybe you've saved one other parent from going through it is what's driving this this campaign that you
exactly. Say all of what I've learned, everything that I do, she's there with me. And I'm not a person, I don't even like taking photos of myself. I'm very quiet. I'd rather be sat in the middle of my field with my horses and not talk to anybody. That's me. She was the one that would shout from the rooftops, be the centre of attention, dance in the middle of a room if she wanted to. So she's there with me all the time, and it's because of her that I won't deny it. I enjoy learning sometimes, and I have enjoyed learning what I have, but there has been that constant reason all the time. She's every single second. I mean, all the time they're alive. You want to say, just shut up, go away, give me 2 minutes. Now she's there all the time, in my ear, every second of every day. And if I'm not thinking about her for 1 minute, you feel guilty. Why have I not thought about her? Why have I been happy? And it has helped.
You didn't say, how long ago was this that this happened?
2018, May the 26th. So
it's only just 2 years, and actually, you know, people quite often say to me, because that's part of the work that I do alongside this is supporting people with bereavement. They say it's actually getting worse. It's not getting easier, because, and it's like I said to you before, it's something about the pain of it. While you've got the pain of it, you feel close.
Yes.
But you don't want to have the pain of it because you don't want to. So, and as you move on, you kind of, it's the distance, isn't it? And then there's not so much of the first anniversaries and things, and you start to realise the foreverness of it.
Yes.
It's very difficult, isn't it, to get the words to explain it.
Definitely.
Because I think we don't talk about it.
No. Enough. I think the first year, although you feel it's absolutely horrible, and I mean it is, every single day is horrible, you have to sort of relearn how to live, I suppose. I will never ever be the person I was before. I'm still sort of me, but I'm a different me. And I think that's sort of how life, it doesn't, I suppose, yes, life continues. I think,
but it's not the same.
Yeah,
it's the ripple, isn't it, of how it affects other people as well, because they actually want you to get over it and be back to normal so that they can get themselves back to normal. But this is a new normality for you, because it can never be the same. Nothing can ever be the same.
No. Exactly. And sort of doing what I do, I suppose it helps in my grief. I still keep her there, because I might be talking about cocaine, which is middle-aged men, but because it's got that link to drugs, it still links me to her in a roundabout sort of way. Again, I could be talking about county lines, which again she was never involved in, but again, because it's got that link to drugs, I'm still linked to her. And it's, I suppose, that, like you said, the ripples, that spider web of life. And I'm now finding lots of things that I can still link to her. I can still keep her here. A lot of people ask me how I can tell her story in such detail. And the consultant has even said to me, he said, you remember that word for word from what I told you? And I said, yeah, because that is what is stuck in my head. The whole day was a blur, absolute blur. But those words, because they were about her and because they were about what was happening, has just stayed with me. And retelling that story, it doesn't take me back to that day, but it just means I can talk about her again. I mentioned her name, I imagine how happy she was the day she was going, and it's that sort of weirdness that I suppose that you have with grief. You learn to deal with life in any way you can.
It just is alongside you, isn't it? It's alongside you always.
Always. Yeah.
Just going on to your campaign now. So where are you going now? What is it that you're doing, and how are you building this, and what's your hope that it's going to achieve?
Wow. Just before lockdown, which has made obviously a huge impact on us. Just before lockdown, I had many schools booked in, and it's taken a long time to get to where I've got to with schools. Like we said earlier, I can't just knock on the door and say I want to tell my story, because there has to be lots of ticked boxes, and I've now done lots of courses and things like that. I've learned along the way, and I now know.
What have you done? What courses have you done?
I've done a youth mental health course in first aid, which basically is about harm reduction, and it goes through things like self-harm, anxiety, depression, lots of things like that, and how to deal with it. So again, it sort of taught me how to do the harm reduction thinking. As a parent, you find something, say you found a child harming themselves, you would want to take everything off them and say, don't do that again. Whereas actually with harm reduction, you go and talk to them and you show them how to bandage themselves properly. You tell them if they're going to do it again, you use something clean to do it. You don't use something horrible. And it's sort of rewriting your brain, I suppose, to not go into parent mode. And it is extremely hard at times. But yeah, I found that course very interesting. I've also done a level 4 diploma in drug and alcohol and solvent abuse counselling, and I've just done a level 3, I think it is, in substance alcohol misuse as well. So I've learned a lot. I do know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Basically, it's what I'm now going into school saying. So yeah, just before lockdown, I had roughly about 20 plus schools booked in, and groups as well, because it doesn't have to be a school setting. I think talking to parents, whether it be a private setting, I come round to your house and I just discuss things with you, because like I said, I actually didn't know half of what's going on out there, but now I do know. I know what to look out for, I suppose. So yeah, it's not just young people, it's parents, it's carers, it's people in school settings, other child settings. I actually spoke to 100 people linked with Hampshire Child Services. So again, it sort of covers all the different aspects of working with children, from teachers to police. So yeah, it was all going on. We were all kicking off. I had lots and lots of things booked in. And
is it a charity that you've created?
It is a charity, but we're a community interest company. A charity had lots and lots of red tape, and it is
yes. Yeah, I know about that.
Me on my own. I haven't got a team of anybody. I've got lots of people that I turn to. Motivate, which is a local charity that work with young people, and they cover all aspects of life with young people, have been absolutely brilliant, and I've been doing lots of work with them. We do Detached every week, which is basically you go out, sounds a bit seedy, you go out on the streets and you talk to young people as they're walking past you, just to see if they're all right, if they need any help with anything, just to make sure they're okay and that they know there are people there if they've got a problem. So I've been doing that with them. Also our local mayor, he's been absolutely brilliant and he helps me out with bits and pieces. Fiona from the Daniel Spargo MABS Foundation runs a harm reduction education based in Croydon, and she's been doing this. Her son died about 6 years ago, I believe, and she goes into schools, etc. So I ask her for a lot of advice and she helps me as well. So although I'm doing this on my own, I'm not on my own at all. I've got lots of people I can turn to. But yeah, that's why I didn't go as a charity, because of all the meetings and everything you're supposed to have. So I'm a community interest company.
Are there lots of other people doing this same thing that you've met across the country, or are you a bit of a lone voice?
We are, unfortunately. Again, as I found out along the way, I've been to various things now and talks, and it always seems to be the same people that go. There is literally a handful of charities that do this up and down the country. Fiona, who I mentioned earlier, she's just linked up with Scotland. So, and she's based in London. Scotland have got nothing at all up there like this. Wow. And the only people that do it seem to be people like myself and her that have already lost someone or already have connections with education, that go on to do these charities and to talk to other people. a lot of parents can't face talking about it, and that's absolutely fine. Like I said, for me personally, it helps with my grief, and that's just my personality.
And for some, there's a shock, isn't there? I didn't know they did drugs, and also there's a stigma, isn't there, to it too. What will people think? And there's still that stigma to drug addict, and I think there are so many people with anxieties, mental illness, all sorts of things going on in their lives because of stigma. They don't get the help that they could get if they were prepared. We do need to talk more about everything. But if I said to you, okay, here's a magic wand, what is it you would like to see? If you could just do anything with this, what would you like to happen?
I suppose my whole thing with all of this is I want people to talk. I call my little talks Let's Talk Drugs, because I believe if we talk about things, then they're not hidden away. They're not that huge problem. And there's lots of things I suppose I personally should talk about more that would stop a lot of things niggling me in life. That's human. That's what we do. But yeah, like you said, there's just this huge stigma on drugs. We've been brought up to imagine a drug addict as a heroin addict or in a crack house, covered in God knows what, dirt from top to bottom, clothes ripped, probably sex trafficking as well. That is what we class anyone that dies of drugs. That's what you picture, because that's what we've been brought up to believe. It's not true at all. That is such a minute minority of people that are in that category. I, since Georgia, talked to many mums like myself who have lost children through curiosity. Like we said earlier, it's an accidental drug overdose. And it's not just MDMA, it's ketamine, it's cocaine, and lots of other drugs in between, even alcohol. There's lots of young people that have their stomachs pumped, and if they didn't have their stomachs pumped, they would be dead. That is how close they come to death all the time. And none of us talk about this. If we spoke about it more, if we can educate people more on what to do and how to be safe, little things like make sure you've got a phone signal if you're going to go and do these things, because if it goes wrong, you can't call for help. I know children as young as 12, 11 that have died from accidental drug overdose, and still you have that stigma of the heroin addict, the crack house, the dirt, and it's really it's not. And I think that's the thing that I want to stop the most, is the stigma and not talking about drugs, how they actually are realistically in life every day.
So eventually you'd like to roll out this program that you're doing to schools and colleges and get other people to volunteer for you to carry this out there.
Yeah, it would be lovely. And I think sort of like university children at the moment is the most recent, I suppose, with drugs. And I think what a lot of people don't realise is a lot of the time with young people, university might be the first time they're away from home on their own. Yes, they may be 20. You may think they're an adult. They're not. They're scared. They're terrified. And you have drug dealers or people working with drug dealers that go around handing out business cards randomly to all the university students, advertising sale of drugs or giving freebies. I mean, it doesn't have to be on the internet. It doesn't have to be through social media.
And also there's that peer pressure, as you say.
Exactly.
You know, so they haven't done it before, and it's a new normality for them, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. You have Freshers Week where everyone gets drunk and do maybe things that they wouldn't normally do. You're in that strange place, that strange setting, meeting new people. You're trying to maybe change yourself a little bit, leave your old life behind and start a new one, and you're all celebrating. And when you're happy like that, you let your guard down, and it's a very, very easy to get hold of drugs in those sort of settings. So yeah, it's not just young people, it's through the whole world, I suppose, adults as well.
So it's to educate and talk about it.
Really. Exactly. We just need to talk drugs and do drugs safely, or as safe as you possibly can. Obviously, the safest thing is
if you're going to do them. Yeah.
But yeah, if you're going to, you need to know how to be safe and how to do
and
it.
to look after yourself.
And everyone else with you.
Thanks, Janine. Thank you so much for your honesty and for sharing your story this afternoon. And yeah, we'll get links and things to your Facebook pages and to your work. And please keep in touch and let us know how it's all going.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Speak to you soon. Hang on.
Bye-bye.